You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. My email address, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our radio website where you can listen to the X-Zone Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. until midnight. And then for the rest of the time and the rest of the week, you can listen to the best of the X-Zone 24/7, 365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. And speaking about X-Zone TV, all the episodes in their entirety from Season 1 of the X-Zone TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, are now available for viewing by everyone at www.xzonetv.com. It is a very busy day today in the news world. As you know, President Obama is currently still delivering his State of the Union address. This is his very last one because the new president starts his or her job on January 17th, 2016. We have, let me see, over the last, let's just go 14 days, we had, Iran today arrested. I'm putting that in brackets because we don't know if it's an arrest or a rescue. 10 sailors from 2 ships, American sailors, on the eve of the beginning of the Iranian nuclear deal that many people thought was a big mistake. We also have the leader of Korea who claims to have detonated a hydrogen bomb, something that all the intelligence services of the world weren't keyed into. ISIS, well, we know that they're going strong today. They bombed 2 cities, including Istanbul in Turkey. And look what's happening in Germany. We're going to be talking about the events that happened in Cologne New Year's Eve, as well as all the other topics that I talked about, plus much more, with my guest this hour, the one and only Howard Bloom at www.howardbloom.net. He is the author of what I call the Rosetta Stone to what is going on in the Middle East today, the Mohammed Code, and it's available at Amazon.com. And Howard, always great having you with me, my friend. But I must first of all say to you and yours, Howard, a very happy New Year, old friend.
Rob, have a great 2016. Well, it's a tumultuous 2 weeks, as you just pointed out. Something else happened within the last 2 weeks. The Iranian Navy harassed an American carrier and a French frigate in the Straits of Hormuz and launched rockets that passed within 1,500 yards of these aircraft carriers. And the kinds of rockets that are being used around the world, not just by the West, but by countries like Iran, are Exocet missiles that have a proven record of absolutely demolishing the ships with which they make contact. The president is astonishing because we usually complain about him, you and I, on this show. But the fact is, when he gives a speech, he touches your heart, he touches your sense of reason. Today, he said, this is not about looking at the past, it's a matter of looking at the future. Where others see massive change and fear it, it's our job to see massive change and understand how to surf it. It's our job to know how to master it and turn it to our advantage. And he's absolutely right about that. But you have to use all of your faculties to grasp the future. And one of those faculties is fear. And when I used to run small businesses, I used to tell my staff members, that they had to have something called preemptive paranoia, which means take advantage of your sense of fear to feel out those things that can go wrong in the future, then build strategies that make sure that those bad things never happen so you can make the good things that you really want to happen.
Howard, one thing that the members of the media were talking about earlier this evening about the State of the Union address was whether or not President Obama was going to mention anything about the 10 sailors, 9 males and 1 female seaman, that were tonight in Iranian custody.
And the original, what the White House did is it released a transcript of the written speech. And that transcript may have been finished out before this incident happened with the sailors. The president was not, I mean, I've only read 75% of it so far. But in that first 75%, the president was not mentioning these things. However, as you pointed out, he's probably still giving his speech. And there's room for ad libs in that speech.
But according to White House sources,
we don't know.
According to White House sources and State Department sources, he is not going to mention anything about the 10 sailors that are presently being detained by Iran because they want, or they would like to believe, this is my interpretation of all the gobbledygook that's been coming out of the White House and the State Department over the last couple of hours, they want to give Iran the benefit of the doubt, that they want to show the world that as part of this nuclear deal, they were able to peaceably end this mistake or this rescue or have Iran release these 10 seamen, which apparently is going to happen in international waters in a couple of hours from now.
Well, that would be very nice, and if a diplomatic solution is achieved, then that's terrific. Iran, no, I don't see any new reports on these sailors. But at any rate, the real trick here is that we signed a deal that basically isn't a deal with Iran because they don't do anything. I mean, yes, they shipped some uranium out, but they kept enough uranium to make some nuclear weapons. It's at apparently a high enough grade of uranium that they can use it to make weapons. They're supposed to deactivate a whole bunch of centrifuges. They're supposed to disassemble 1 nuclear plant. All of this is supposed to be done by next week. But the fact is that the Iranians in the past have built 2 entire huge nuclear facilities, and our inspectors perceived it. They didn't see it. It was invisible. So what we're getting, I mean, we know we're bringing up $100 billion in resources to the Iranians next week. Are we really getting anything in exchange for that? Well, to me, the JPOA, which is the name of the Iranian nuclear deal, looked like it was so full of holes that it couldn't even qualify as a Swiss cheese because there wasn't enough cheese. Too many holes. And we will have to see. I mean, the Ayatollah, look, there's one guy who runs Iran like a dictator, and that's the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. And the Ayatollah Khamenei gave a speech in the last 2 weeks in which he said, the greatest innovation of our founding father, the Ayatollah Khomeini, was his identification of the United States, the United is the Great Crusade against the United States. That's in essence what he said.
You know, I look at the Iranian nuclear deal as a win-win for Iran, and the rest of the world gets a, well, maybe if your inspectors want to see if we're really, keeping up our part of the bargain, we'll let you know.
Well, and the Iranians have been very overt. They've launched, I believe it's 2 missiles, and these are what they're launching these missiles. These missiles only have roughly a 1,200-mile range. That's not long enough to get to the United States. But they have deliberately launched these windows before the deal goes into effect, basically saying, we're not going to stop saber rattling. We're not going to stop our military exercises. We are not backing down. It's you, the United States, who are backing down. You are turning tail. You are showing yourself to be a coward. You are showing that you are no longer the great power that you used to be. And we are showing that we are a power on the rise. The This is a test. What I just gave you was a summation of stuff that has appeared in Iranian speeches over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And the language is a lot tougher than I just made it out to be. When two stags go up against each other, two male stags, they have worked all year to find the best territory, to find the best food, and now in a period, the rutting period, when they get access to females, they have to compete like hell for those females. And they walk in a parallel line, eyeing each other. Why? Because each one is trying to demonstrate his strength and his confidence. And this president gives wonderful speeches, but he does not demonstrate that kind of strength and confidence because he believes that if you back down from the beginning, if you give concessions from the beginning, the other side will respond to your generosity with a generosity of its own. Unfortunately, in 7 years of being president, he hasn't learned yet that is not what happens. Other people take your measure and decide that you are weak. And that thing that you and I refer to in interview after interview of drawing a red line in Syria against chemical weapons and then backing down once chemical weapons are used, that has been read all over the world. Now, the result is that just today, Newsweek put out a piece in which it asked the question of whether the Baltic states, that's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, whether those three countries are the next ones that Putin is going to invade. And it gives very strong reasons to believe that, yes, Putin will invade them. And one of those reasons is that NATO, first, NATO consists of Europe plus us.
Right.
Well, Europe is basically almost disarmed for the course of the last 30 years or so because they rely on the United States for their defense. So they can pretend America's the great warmonger and they're peace lovers. In fact, they are opening a vacuum for war. And Putin has taken the measure of them and he's taken the measure of us. And NATO physically cannot match the war machine, according to Newsweek, of Russia. So we have these power vacuums and power shifts taking place all over the world. That's in Obama's speech. Obama says this is a world of constant change. And the task of Americans is to grasp a change that could be catastrophic and turn it into incredible opportunity. And he's right. But we are not projecting the kind of confidence that Teddy Roosevelt projected. Teddy Roosevelt projected it by having strength and then being able to demonstrate strength, but not until he knew he wasn't bluffing, that he could back it up. And even Ronald Reagan was operating, not a guy I like, but his jokes were nice. His personality was a pleasure, but I don't like his policies. But even Ronald Reagan was able to project a sense of confidence and strength. And Obama projects a sense of, I'm going to be generous with you in the hope that you will be generous with me.
Wasn't it just last week that Russia announced that it was considering NATO to be a threat to the Russian homeland?
Well, it's felt that way for a long time. If you read Pravda RU or any of the Russian papers, 3 years ago, you and I talked about the fact that there were giant headlines about the fact that Obama was trying to use this Syrian conflict, the so-called Syrian civil war, to put American troops into Syria that would then march straight up to Moscow and take the country over. So there's this extraordinarily paranoid view that is projected in the Soviet press or the Russian press. It feels like the Soviet Union, even though now it's just Russia.
Right.
But that's projected in the Russian press not as fantasy, but as reality. So the reality with which Russians live, waking up every day to the latest episode of the headlines, is one which the United States is threatening a traditional war against Russia on a continuing basis. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they have an evaluation that says that NATO is weak, because Newsweek comes to the same conclusion, that we have nowhere near the strength of Russia right now, and we couldn't bring that strength to bear in Europe in any meaningful way if Russia chose to go into the Baltic states.
Exonation, I guess this hour
and
is...
Washington, what would Russia do? It wouldn't march a bunch of troops in. It wouldn't march a bunch of troops in, a bunch of tanks in. It would do what it did in the Ukraine.
All right, Howard, we're going to have to take...
Had anything to do.
Howard, we're going to have to take a break because my producer just told me Skype is starting to cack out on us over here. So we're going to go to a commercial break. I'm going to call you back, and we're going to get this interview going again. So please stand by. Exonation, our guest this hour, the one and only Howard Bloom. www.howardbloom.net is his website, and if you'd like to see a little bit of that fascinating book that Howard wrote that is called The Muhammad Code. It's available at Amazon.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, and we will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Thomas Jefferson was a Burgess of 27 when he met Martha Wales Skelton, a 22-year-old widowed heiress who was fondly called Patty by her family. They were married on January the 1st, 1772, and they took up residence in a cabin on the building site on top of a Virginia mountain that Thomas had named Monticello. As Thomas and Patty slowly built their first version of the great house at Monticello, the Revolutionary War was heating up. Patty, with difficulty, bore 5 children, but only 2 girls survived. Thomas's political career developed to the point where he was often away from home, but after he authored and signed the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, he resolved never again to leave his wife. He was elected the governor of Virginia, just as that state became the Revolution's last battleground. The Revolutionary War ended in 1781, and Thomas gladly retired altogether to my family, my farm, and my books. But Patty continued to want to bear her treasured husband a son, and late in the summer of 1782, she died of kidney failure at the age of 33, 4 months after having borne yet another girl. Thomas was so devastated by her death that he never remarried. He mourned her for the rest of his life, even as he helped to frame the peace in France and then became the first Secretary of State, the second Vice President, and the third President of the United States. This story is true. Thomas Jefferson was such an obsessive letter writer and record keeper that we know where he was and what he was doing nearly every day of his adult life. Every significant thing he says in My Thomas comes from his contemporary writings. My Thomas by Roberta Grimes is now available at Barnes & Noble, Costco, Target, Books A Million, Hudson Booksellers, Kmart, Walmart, Sam's Club, Walgreens, CVS, and online at Amazon.com. You can visit Roberta Grimes online at www.robertagrimes.com. All right, Exo Nation, Howard Bloom is my guest this hour. We're going to see if we can get Howard back. Apparently, the bandwidth has gone skyrocketing because of the president's speech. Can you believe that? Even just people going to the internet to listen to what he is saying, watching what he's saying, is having a toll on the bandwidth. For more information about Howard Bloom, www.howardbloom.net. And Exo Nation, if you'd like to get a copy of his book entitled The Muhammad Code, it's available at www.amazon.com. Always great having you with us, Howard. How are you doing, buddy?
You're sounding brilliant. Beautiful.
Thank you, my friend. Okay, so we were talking about, where did we leave off?
Well, the great imbalance in the world right now. North Korea is trying to make it plain that it made it plain 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. Kim Jong-un made it very clear that his nuclear weapons are designed for one target and one target only, the United States of America. He's got 70 submarines. Now, I was only able to do a little bit of research on those submarines. The scary part is that those 7 submarines are diesel electric, and diesel electric is quieter than nuclear subs. And the result is that there's an American admiral, Rear Admiral Frank Drennan, who on March 2015, not that long ago, said that that picking up the quiet hum of a battery-powered diesel-electric submarine in busy coastal waters is like trying to identify the sound of a single car engine in the din of a major city. In other words, we and our ally, South Korea, cannot detect these submarines once they go underwater. They can stay underwater for 3 days. They are considered an old-fashioned, decrepit fleet. But the fact is they can launch missiles, and they did destroy a South Korean naval vessel not that long ago. They wiped it off the face of the map, killed all of the people in it. When they get ocean-going capacities, they will be able to bring their missiles with their nuclear warheads right off the American shore. Now, who knows when they're going to get their capacity, but imagine this. Pakistan, a country that has more than its share of fundamentalist pro-ISIS crazies, has got 3 submarines that are ocean-going diesel-electric submarines of the kind that cannot be detected, and that can carry 16 missiles each, and those missiles can be equipped with nuclear warheads, and Pakistan has approximately 130 nuclear warheads at this point. And Pakistan could fall to its crazies, to its Islamic jihadists any day. So we have to keep our eyes peeled for these things. The New York Times had a really crazy article today, an absolutely insane article. It pointed out, it said, we should not be concerned about terrorists. We should not be concerned about ISIS. Why? Because your chances of dying in an auto accident are greater than your chances of being killed by a terrorist. Your chances of drowning in your own bathtub are greater than your chances of being killed by a terrorist organization like ISIS. Statistically, that's true. But you could have made the same statement about Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in 1933, that you had a greater chance in 1933 of being killed by lightning than you had of being killed by a Nazi. The difficulty was perceiving what the situation would be and how it would change in the next 6 years. And that was an essential element that was missing from Neville Chamberlain's view of the world. These people, we can either imagine that ISIS is the JV team and go on about our business and be more concerned about drowning in bathtubs than about ISIS, or we can see that ISIS at any moment could get its hands on nuclear weapons, it could get its hands on Pakistan submarines, it could get its hands on something really nasty. And we have to remember a 10-year-old statement from one member of Al-Qaeda who said that it looks like we're going to have to wipe out 4 million Americans to achieve our aims in the West. Well, I'm in New York.
Yeah.
And it's New York or Washington where those 4 million people would come from. So I'm in the bullseye. And you will be in the bullseye in one way or another, too. So it's a strange world. It's a dangerous world. It's a world where we have increased the factor of peace we've increased peace by a factor of 10 since 1650. That's the last 365 years approximately. That's an amazing achievement. But we have not yet banished war. We have not yet banished weapons of mass destruction. And those weapons of mass destruction can be used by people whose slogan is, we love death more than you love life.
What would happen if ISIS joined forces with North Korea?
Well, guess who has joined forces with North Korea for a long time now? Iran. And Iran is another jihadist state. Jihad is built into the words of the founding father of modern Iran, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. And he says that, I don't have the quote in front of me, but I'll paraphrase it to the best of my ability. He says that the day will come when we absolutely must make holy war on the West, and when every able-bodied man will be required to participate in that war, and we must make that war until we wipe out every government that doesn't bow down to Islam and doesn't rule according to the Islamic law of Sharia. And the statement goes on, and it's far bloodier than what I've just said. He says infidels are as impure as urine and as dog feces, and a bunch of things like that. He makes it very clear that you, if you are not a faithful, loyal Muslim, or you, if you are not a faithful, loyal leader of a state leading according to Islamic rules as Iran sees those rules, you are a tyrant and must be wiped off the face of the planet. So he's calling for holy war. This is an entire country that somewhere in its cultural DNA has got holy war, and has got holy war in which horrific casualties are, hey.
And you're talking about Iran.
Fine. What's that?
And you're talking about Iran.
Iran as Korea's ally.
And yet we have this marvelous deal that was just signed with Iran where we give them all this money based on the supposition, based on a contract, and we all know that a contract or an agreement is only as good as the paper it's written on. So what we've got in return is zip all, except the Khomeini who is telling his followers that they have to have a war with the West.
Yes, that's basically the situation. And the approach has been Hillary Leverett Manning is one of the great promoters of Iran in the United States. She's one of the great lobbyists for Iran in the United States. And she promotes an only half-spoken idea, which is that if America makes peace with Iran, suddenly the lion and the lamb will sleep together and the world will become a paradise.
And we'll all hold hands and sing Kumbaya.
Yeah, she's got to be absolutely blind to everything that the Iranian clerics who run the country are saying. Right now, if you read the latest stories in the Washington Post and the New York Times, they read as if there's a battle for power going on between the current president of Iran and the current Secretary of State of Iran, or Secretary of Foreign Policy of Iran, and the crazies, the militants, the jihadists. No such thing is happening. This is a shadow dance. It's a puppet play. The Ayatollah makes the decisions, the Ayatollah Khomeini. And the Ayatollah Khomeini is not a moderate. And he has said unequivocally he will never be a moderate. That if he ever becomes a moderate toward the United States and the West, he will be cursed by God himself.
So what do we do?
And we're pretending this doesn't exist.
So what do we do? We've got North Korea, who has a wackadoodle for a leader, who, in my opinion, is just itching to pull the switch. Yeah.
And you've got Iran.
Yeah.
And what do we do? Okay, let me give you the most extreme thing. There was another interesting story in the New York Times today about miniaturizing nuclear weapons, existing nuclear weapons, and putting them on smart platforms. In other words, rockets with fins, so you could guide them to their target. And using micro nukes that you could guide like smart bombs to accomplish some, it didn't say what. But guess what you could accomplish with weapons like that?
Peace.
The Iranian nuclear facilities are dug so deep in the ground that you probably can never reach them with conventional weapons, even with these huge bunker buster bombs that we've created for precisely its kind of task. But the smart guided mini nukes could take care of these things. The question is, do we take care of Iran's nuclear facilities and North Korea's nuclear facilities now by violent means? After first doing a great deal of diplomacy with China and Russia so that they don't snap into a war footing and make a nuclear war out of it? Or do we simply coast along while Iran interprets the deal? Here's how Iran interprets the deal. We've made a deal, they say, in which the United Nations validates our right to have a cutting-edge nuclear industry with absolutely the latest nuclear technology. The United States has acknowledged our right to that nuclear industry. And we are going to get sanctions lifted. Now, does that sound like Iran is giving up anything?
No.
And certainly Iran doesn't make it sound to its own people as if it's giving up anything. And yes, apparently, according to all the reports, a bunch of nuclear material was shipped out of Iran to Russia. But guess what? The same thing was supposed to have happened to the chemical weapons of Bashar Assad in Syria. And reports have come out in the last 2 weeks that chemical weapons, possibly sarin, are being used in Syria. So it's obvious that, or maybe it's not so obvious, but it certainly looks as if what Bashar Assad has done is ship out enough weapons to make a theatrical show of disarming himself with chemical weapons, and yet to keep enough chemical weapons to do whatever nasty business he wants to do with them. And the same is likely to be true of Iran with its nukes.
If we want world peace, and that's what I'd like. I know that's what you'd like, and our listeners, everyone would love world peace. You have to take a stand. You can't keep pulling back from that red line. You have to cross it and say, hey, fight me, fight my gang.
Right.
And I think the time has come where we have to do something about Iran, besides all this time and money wasted on trying to use a diplomatic solution that will never work. And we have to take out the leadership of North Korea.
Well, I think we have to take out the nukes of North Korea. The leader, who knows? We certainly have to work very closely with China in anything that we do in North Korea. And we have to work with Russia. Russia is Iran's ally. And we don't want Russia springing in. I mean, Russia's been modernizing its nukes.
Yeah.
America's been leaving its nukes. Well, there has been talk about putting a huge amount of money into modernizing our nukes.
But it may be too late.
Well, Russia's done it, and we probably haven't done it yet. So, yes, there may come a time when you have to show force because that's all people respect in the long run.
So, with everything that's going on in North Korea, and then what's going on in the Middle East with Iran, is it me or is North America being sandwiched by these two threats?
North America is being sandwiched by these two threats. Threats are an omnipresent part of just being alive as a human being. Threats are alive or an omnipresent part of being any kind of life form. Bacteria live under constant threat from enemy colonies that would like to exterminate them. Ants live under constant threat from enemy colonies that would like to exterminate them. It's a natural kind of thing, and you have to maintain the balance. You have to show that you're strong enough to maintain your position and your territory. The problem is that we've had so much of Barack Obama that what apparently a lot of us are looking to as the antidote, the anti-Barack Obama, is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump told his audience yesterday that he would love to run against Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders is going to charge people a 90% tax rate. Donald Trump must have pulled, I don't know whether he pulled that out of his left buttock or his right, but it came from one of those two because it has no relationship to reality. So if we have a man in the White House who doesn't know anything and who makes things up as he goes along and never checks his facts, then we're in even bigger trouble.
What do you think his chances are of winning?
I think his chances are very good of winning. I think we are so tired of the Barack Obama approach. Even though when I read a speech like the speech he gave tonight, they're brilliant.
Yeah, they are.
They're amazing. I agree with them. They speak on behalf of me. They speak about innovation. They speak about opportunity. They speak about using hard work and perseverance to make a future that otherwise wouldn't exist without you. And those are all things that I deeply believe in. But we've had so much of Barack Obama's very measured approach that doesn't feed our emotional needs in the political world. The political world is all about emotion. It's all about spotting bad guys and identifying who we are and what we stand for in our opposition to bad guys. And Barack Obama tries his best not to see bad guys, but to see the good side of the other side, which is valuable in many ways. But it doesn't satisfy us emotionally. And so here comes Donald Trump, who tells us, I mean, there's this old saying from one of my clients, Ralph McConnell, he had it on his wall. They must think I'm a mushroom because they keep me in the dark.
And feed me nothing but crap.
And they feed me excrement.
Yeah.
The word wasn't excrement on the poster, but we're trying to avoid a four-letter word that would get us in trouble on the radio.
Yes.
And that's the way Donald Trump operates with that degree of ignorance. And it's dangerous, but because he's satisfying our emotional needs that Barack Obama has not been feeding, our need for an anger and an assertive statement against them, whoever them are, he just could be elected.
All right. As we all know, that it takes a smart CEO to surround himself with the smartest people that he can get a hold of. And he depends on their experience. He depends on their wisdom in order to make his company grow. Is it possible that if Donald Trump is elected and he is able to bring together a team for his inner group, for his different secretariats that are required, that he could actually use his business experience as a very successful CEO to be a very successful president of the United States?
It's conceivable. How do you get as far as he's gotten? How do you make as many billions as he's made without surrounding yourself with a smart team? But the problem is, on his television show, he makes it look as if executive leadership is all about firing people. You're fired is his big line. Would you want to work for a person who prides himself on his ability to humiliate and fire people?
But do we really take everything that is on TV as fact? Like it's a reality show,
but I have never seen, and I haven't been looking for it, but I have never seen an analysis of how Donald Trump actually runs his business, and it would be very useful to see such a thing. Because you may be right. You may be absolutely right, Rob, that he couldn't have gotten this far without a good team. But we really don't know.
Well, taking the example of watching TV to get a feel for the person, my good Lord, there are so many wackadoodles out there who are on these reality TV shows who don't know their left arm from their left buttock. Right. And yet people watch it for the entertainment value.
Right.
And yet when you meet these people off camera, away from the reality set, they're a hell of a lot smarter than you ever gave them credit to. And you know what? They're smarter than we gave them credit to because they keep an audience growing.
Right.
Based on their...
Well, certainly Donald Trump has a feel for that. And as I say, he's giving us emotional satisfaction that we haven't had over the 10 years of a distant, aloof, very, very rational, well-meaning president. But your emotional needs are not always really on target. You need, in order to make wise decisions, you need to engage your emotional system. Your emotional system tells you a great deal. It measures out things in the world that you can't measure out with your rational system. There's an experiment in which a bunch of people who basically had their rational system damaged are given they're given several stacks of cards. And one of the stacks of cards is slightly positive. In other words, they flip a card over, and it tells them what they're going to get, or what penalty they're going to get, or what reward they're going to get.
Right.
One deck has slightly more rewards than penalties. One deck has slightly more penalties than rewards. These people don't have their rational faculties intact, but they do have their emotional faculties intact. There's another group of people who are run through the same experiment with the same kinds of decks of cards, poisoned and sweetened gifts of cards. And they have their rational system fully intact, but have no emotional system intact. Which group do you think gets it, understands on a visceral level that one of these cards is poisoned, one of these card decks is poisoned, and the other card deck is stacked with rewards? Which gets it first? The people who only have an emotional sense of things but no rational sense of things, or the people who only have a rational sense of things but no emotional sense of things?
I'll go with the non-emotional.
The emotional get it faster than the folks with rationality. Right. The bottom line is you need your reason and you need your emotion working together in order to accomplish things in this world, in order to feel out the traps, the dangers, the risks, and in order to feel out the opportunities in this world. And there's a little bit of the too much rational and too little emotional in Barack Obama, at least in the way he projects himself to us. And we need that emotional meat. We need it deeply from a leader.
He's a great politician, but he's not a warrior.
No, he's not a warrior at all. However, let's just walk that statement back for a second. He did take out Osama bin Laden.
Was it him or his team?
That was a major achievement. He says in his speech today that he took out the ISIS head in Yemen. Well, not even the Al-Qaeda head in Yemen. He names 2 or 3 major leaders within the jihadist world that he has taken out. And he has been, as he says, relentless in this. It has taken years to track these guys down, and it has taken great risks. But he's still that cold-blooded, rational person. You never see a moment of anger, and sometimes you need to see a moment of controlled fury when it's justified.
Could he be the perfect example of what you and I were just discussing before, using Donald Trump, saying that, you could be an average Joe, but if you have the right team behind you, you can move mountains. And could this be what happened with Barack Obama? Because when you look at him, listen to him, he doesn't seem like the person who could actually take out bin Laden, who could do all this stuff against ISIS. It must be the people with the experience, the people with the stars on the shoulders in that funny building called the Pentagon that are actually doing all his bidding for him.
Well, from the very beginning,
Yeah.
made a point of, Doris Kearns Goodwin's book about Lincoln and a team of rivals. He brought Hillary Clinton on board. Now, Hillary Clinton's taken a lot of slamming from the far right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've seen her performance in front of Congress where she finally gets fed up with them and tells them off, it's one of the most courageous things I've seen in politics.
Well, what I saw was a lady who got 7 hours of free publicity and advertising.
Well, she may have gotten that, but I loved it when she got pissed off at Congress because they deserved it. And nobody else was going to give it to them like that. It's give him hell Harry moment. So to pick his chief rival for the presidential office was quite something. He does pull in good people. Plus, he saw the value in the programs that Hank Paulson, who had been running the Fed for George Bush, Hank Paulson walked into the White House when the crash occurred in 2007 and 2008 and said, if we don't do something in 10 days, the entire world economy is going to collapse. And we have to jump in there and stop the next domino from falling before all the dominoes all over the world fall and all the banks all over the world collapse. And he was right.
Yeah.
And the result was a $700 billion program at a time when nobody even dared pronounce the word billion. And Barack Obama saw the wisdom of that. He also saw the wisdom of keeping Ben Bernanke. And he continued the program that George Bush and Hank Paulson started of shoring up the world economy, shoring up the world's credit institutions. What people don't realize when they're cursing the bankers in Wall Street for bringing the collapse of 2007 and 2008 is that if there had been a real heavy-duty collapse, the kind of collapse that occurred from 1929 to 1931, no one would have been able to use a credit card anymore. No one would have ever been able to write a check anymore for years because the banks would have closed. People would not have been able to pay their rent. People would not have been able to buy their groceries. The miracle of the collapse of 2007 and 2008 is that for the first time in history, there was a collapse. Well, collapses have happened ever since the beginning of human economies.
Mm-hmm.
But this time in the collapse, people were not left starving. People were not thrown out of their homes. People were still able to pay their rent. And the folks you and I know, do not understand what they were saved from. And they were saved in part because of what you just said, because of Barack Obama's ability to see a good leader, even if that leader came from the other side, as Ben Bernanke did, and to keep that leader in place. Or as his Secretary of Defense, William Gates, came from the other side, and he held on to him. So yes, the President Obama has this uniquely ecumenical ability to pull people from all over the place who are gifted and get them to work for him.
Let me ask you, speaking about Hillary, do you think that all bills passed indiscretions are going to be an asset or a hindrance to her in this?
They're going to be a hindrance because the Republican Party, in my eyes, remember I'm a Democrat, is just brilliant at taking minor things and blowing them up wildly out of proportion. And so it portrays Hillary Clinton as a liar. Well, that's no more true. I mean, every politician says things that are not necessarily true, and that's not a good thing. But Hillary Clinton's no more a liar than Paul Ryan, Donald Trump. Donald Trump's in a category of his own when it comes to lies, so we can't throw him in there. But the fact is that the Republicans think that we're dogs.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that they think we're dogs? Because Ivan Pavlov, at the beginning of the 20th century, learned that when you walk into a room with food, a dog salivates.
Yes.
Okay. Then he started ringing a little bell before you walked into the room with food. And after the dogs got the pattern, ring the bell, somebody walks in 30 seconds later and gives you food, They started salivating when he rang the bell. It was association. He was making a simple Pavlovian association. Well, that's the way Republicans work with us. They told us about Barack Obama for 6 years, that everything he wanted to achieve was a job-killing measure. Was that true? Under Barack Obama, we've added more than 13 million jobs. In the last 2 years, we've added more jobs than in the history of the American economy. In the entire history of the American economy, we've never added that many jobs in 2 years before. No, they were lying. And yet, did they get across that idea, job killing, through a Pavlovian process of repetition? They certainly did. And they're doing that with Hillary Clinton when it comes to lying and when it comes to the Monica Lewinsky affair. I'm not saying that a man should take advantage of the Oval Office the way that Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton did. But the real question is, what kind of leader would Hillary be? In a time when we need a leader who really knows his or her stuff, what kind of leader would Hillary be versus what kind of a leader would Ted Cruz be? Because he's the leading alternative right now to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, I mean, really, he's a grotesque mockery of politics.
Speaking about Ted Cruz, the fact that he was born in Canada, do you think that's going to play a part in any large controversy or the possibility of him not being able to run as president?
Nobody seems to be upset about it. It's not something that gets you traction. How do we know? Donald Trump has tried to use it over the last 5 days. And it's produced a minor headline, and it's kept Donald Trump in the headlines for the day, but it's not the kind of thing that has any traction. I don't think anybody cares about that. Canada and the United States are like cousins.
Exactly.
Or like brothers who grew up together on the same continent. So Americans have a very unusual view of Canada. Canada's a part of us, and we're a part of Canada.
No denying that, my friend. No denying that at all. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'd like to talk about what happened in Cologne.
Well, the difficulty is we have humans are a migratory species. And for humans to settle down in a home permanently on a long-term basis is an unusual thing in the 2.5 million year history of humanity. And one of the greatest migrations in the history of mankind is taking place right now with 1 million migrants a year trying to make it from Syria and Afghanistan and other Muslim countries to a Western country, Europe. But they're bringing their own culture with them. They can't help it. And in their own culture, women should not be out on the streets. So if any woman is out on the streets, she's a prostitute. And some of the men, not all of them, probably a very tiny percentage, have been treating the women of Germany as if any woman who's out on New Year's Eve must be a prostitute. And they've terrified these women. These women were afraid that they were going to die in those crowds. They didn't feel they could resist the sexual things that were being done to them. They were being felt all over between their legs, their bottoms, their breasts, everything. And at least one of them claims to have been raped, which is entirely because that would happen in Tunisia or Algeria or Afghanistan or Syria under similar circumstances. It might. This is literally a clash of civilizations. When Samuel Huntington made that phrase, clash of civilizations, and folks in my subculture, the intellectual left, mocked him and called him intolerant for making that phrase up. It was picked up by Al-Qaeda. It was picked up by Osama bin Laden, who said, yes, this is a clash of civilizations. And what's taking place in the streets of Cologne, what's taking place in Brussels, where the Paris attacks were fomented in Belgium. They were put together in Belgium. What's happening in Belgium right now, what's happening in Paris right now is a clash of civilizations because we have this huge mass migration of people from a very different culture, a Muslim secular culture, the culture of Syria, or a Muslim not so secular culture.
But doesn't that just prove the point that bringing these refugees into another culture, whether it's Europe, Germany, Great Britain, anywhere where the Muslim presence isn't as strong, that they cannot be assimilated into our form of society?
The difficulty is that Islam, if you talk to an imam, The imam will tell you. I mean, if you're one of the immigrants and you go to your imam is obligated to tell you that Islam is dominant over all other religions. And yes, Islam can accept the existence of those other religions for a brief period of time. It can accept the existence of those religions so long as it cannot win in a conflict with them. But eventually, Islam must dominate. And eventually, God's own law, Sharia, must be the law of the land. So you have significant minorities within these Islamic populations in England, in France, in Brussels, in Germany, who believe that it is their absolute obligation on behalf of God and truth to make sure that Sharia law becomes the law of Germany, becomes the law of England, and becomes the law of France. And that's very dangerous. So I did a podcast. You know, I do a podcast every week, and I do a YouTube series.
Yeah.
And in the YouTube series, I did one on why Islam is not a religion. And the premise is basically this. In the West, over the last 500 years, we've segregated religion. We've turned it into something that you keep in a little shoebox in the closet of your conscience, and you don't bring out into the public arena. But Islam is not that kind of religion. Islam is designed to take over the entire political system. So by that definition, it is not just something that's a matter for your private conscience. It is a very public, political, military matter. And to that extent, Islam is not a religion. It's not what we define as a religion. It's not something you can keep in a shoebox in the closet of your consciousness.
Wow, Howard, as always, time goes by so fast when you're with us, my friend. Once again, to you and yours, a very happy New Year, and thank you ever so much for coming on the show, Howard. It's always a great pleasure. And Exonation, if you'd like to get a copy of the Muhammad Code by Howard Bloom, go to Amazon.com. And for all the information on Howard, the other books that he has written, visit his website at www.howardbloom.net. Once again, my good friend, thank you so much, Howard. Great pleasure talking to you again.
It is a pleasure.
You are a good friend, my friend, and I look forward to the next time you and I join each other here in the X Zone. So until then, take care of yourself, buddy.
Have a good night, Rob.
You take care, my friend. All right, X Zone Nation, I'll be back on the other side of the news at the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Wow, what a day, what a week. It's going to be exciting to see what happens tomorrow when all the reviews are in about President Obama's State of the Union. Plus, what will happen with those 10 seamen that are presently being held against their will in Iran? We'll be back. Don't go away.